Caught in a storm, Elena Costa knocks on a stranger's door and is offered more than warmth, a chance at belonging. But when her dream job calls months later, will she choose ambition or the life she never knew she wanted? Before we get into the story, comment below where in the world you are watching from today. The rain came down in sheets, turning the dirt road into a river of mud. Elena Costa pulled her thin jacket tighter around her shoulders, but it did little to keep out the cold. At 25, she had already lived through more hardship than most people face in a lifetime. Tonight was just one more challenge. Keep moving, she told herself, pushing wet strands of dark hair from her face. The next town can't be much further. Elena had been walking for hours. Her job at the diner in the last town had ended when the owner sold the business. With no family to turn to and barely enough money for a bus ticket, she had decided to try her luck in Pinewood Valley. She'd heard they needed seasonal workers at the apple orchards. The wind picked up, cutting through her wet clothes like knives. Elena's teeth chattered as she trudged forward, her worn shoes squelching with every step. The storm had caught her by surprise, turning what should have been a short walk into a dangerous situation. Just as her legs began to give out, Elena spotted a light in the distance. As she got closer, she could make out the shape of a farmhouse. Solid, sturdy, and most importantly, lit from within. "Please let someone be home," she whispered, stumbling up the long driveway. The house was larger than she expected, with a wide porch and neatly stacked firewood along one side. A barn stood nearby, and even in the darkness, Elena could tell the property was well maintained. She hesitated at the bottom of the porch steps. Elena wasn't used to asking for help. Life had taught her that kindness often came with strings attached. But she was soaked to the bone, exhausted, and had nowhere else to go. With the last of her strength, she climbed the steps and knocked on the door. For a long moment, nothing happened. Elena knocked again, louder this time. Her legs trembled beneath her, ready to give out. Then the door opened. A man stood there, tall and broad-shouldered, with dark hair and serious eyes that widened slightly at the sight of her. He looked to be in his early 30s, clean-shaven but with a rugged, weathered quality to his face. "I'm sorry to bother you," Elena said, her voice barely audible over the storm. "I got caught in the rain. I just need to get warm for a little while, and then I'll be on my way." The man studied her, taking in her soaked clothes, chattering teeth, and the small bag clutched in her trembling hands. His face was unreadable, but something in his eyes softened. Then he stepped aside and said, "Come in, you'll never be cold again." Elena nearly collapsed with relief as she stepped into the warmth of the house. The entryway opened into a large living room with a stone fireplace where a fire burned steadily. "You're shaking," the man said. "My name is Theo Silveira. This is my farm, Branca Luz." "Elena Costa," she managed through chattering teeth. "Thank you for letting me in." Theo nodded. "Wait here." He disappeared down a hallway, returning moments later with a large towel and what looked like women's clothing, a pair of sweatpants and a flannel shirt. "Bathrooms down the hall, first door on the right," he said, handing her the items. "Get changed, I'll make some tea." Elena didn't question the women's clothing. She was too cold and too grateful. The bathroom was small but clean, with faded blue tiles and a clawfoot tub. She peeled off her wet clothes and dried herself with the towel, sighing as warmth began to return to her body. The sweatpants and flannel shirt were slightly too big, but wonderfully dry. When she returned to the living room, Theo was in the kitchen area, which opened to the living room. He was pouring hot water into 2 mugs. "Feel better?" he asked, not looking up. "Much," Elena said. "Thank you. I don't know what I would have done if you hadn't opened your door." Theo handed her a mug of tea. "Sugar's on the table if you want." Elena wrapped her hands around the warm mug. "This is very kind of you." Theo shrugged. Anyone would do the same. But Elena knew better. In her experience, most people kept their doors firmly shut, especially to strangers who looked like they had nothing to offer in return. "The storm's getting worse," Theo said, glancing out the window. "Where were you headed?" "Pinewood Valley," Elena replied. "I heard they need workers for the harvest." Theo's expression changed slightly. "That's still 15 miles from here. You were planning to walk?" Elena nodded. "I didn't realize it was so far. The man at the bus station said it was just a few miles." "He was wrong," Theo said flatly. And the orchards filled all their positions last week. Elena's heart sank. She'd spent her last dollars on the bus ticket. Without work, she had nothing. Theo must have seen the despair on her face, because he added, "You can stay here tonight. I have a spare room. In the morning I can drive you to town, help you figure something out." "I can't impose," Elena began. "It's not an imposition," Theo cut in. "It's just a room. And it's a lot safer than walking in this weather," Elena wanted to argue, but exhaustion was overtaking her. "Thank you," she said simply. Theo showed her to a small bedroom at the end of the hall. Like the rest of the house, it was neat and comfortable, with a double bed covered in a patchwork quilt, a wooden dresser and a small desk by the window. "Bathrooms across the hall if you need it," Theo said. "Kitchen's open if you get hungry. I'll be up at 5 to feed the animals, but you can sleep as long as you need." "I'll help," Elena said quickly. "With the animals, I mean. It's the least I can do." Theo looked surprised. "You don't have to do that." "I want to," Elena insisted. "I've worked on farms before." This wasn't exactly true, but Elena had done all kinds of jobs over the years. She was a quick learner and wasn't afraid of hard work. Theo studied her for a moment, then nodded. "All right, good night, Elena." "Good night, Theo, and thank you again." After he left, Elena sat on the edge of the bed, trying to process everything that had happened. The room was warm and clean, the bed softer than anything she'd slept on in months. Yet she couldn't shake the feeling that she was intruding on something private. The women's clothes she was wearing belonged to someone. The room, while clean, had a feeling of disuse, as if it had been preserved rather than lived in. There were no personal touches, no photographs or knickknacks, but Elena sensed that this room had once been important to someone. Despite her curiosity, exhaustion won out. Elena slipped under the quilt and fell into a deep, dreamless sleep. Elena woke to the sound of rain still pattering against the window. For a moment she didn't remember where she was. Then it all came back. The storm, the farmhouse, the quiet man who had taken her in. The clock on the bedside table read 4:45 a.m. She'd promised to help with the morning chores, and Elena Costa always kept her promises. She found her own clothes hanging over a heating vent, completely dry. After changing, she made her way to the kitchen, where she found Theo already awake, drinking coffee. "Morning," he said, looking surprised to see her up. "Coffee? Please," Elena said. "I promised I'd help with the animals." Theo poured her a cup. "Storm's passed, but everything's muddy. Hope those shoes of yours can handle it." Elena looked down at her worn sneakers. "They've been through worse." Theo studied her for a moment, then disappeared into a mudroom off the kitchen. He returned with a pair of rubber boots. "Try these," he said. "They might be a bit big, but they'll keep your feet dry." The boots were indeed too large, but Elena was touched by the gesture. "Thank you." Outside, the world was fresh and clean, after the storm. Brancalou's farm was bigger than Elena had realized. Besides the main house and the large barn, there were several smaller outbuildings, fenced pastures, and what looked like an orchard on a gentle slope behind the house. "It's beautiful," Elena said, taking it all in. Theo seemed surprised by her comment. "It's just a farm." "No," Elena said. "It's more than that. You can tell it's cared for." Something flickered in Theo's eyes, but he quickly turned away. "Chickens. First, then the goats. I've got 2 horses and a milk cow in the barn." Elena followed him to a chicken coop where 24 hens clucked and scratched. Theo showed her how to collect eggs and refill the feed troughs. Elena worked carefully, talking softly to the birds as she gathered the warm eggs in a basket. "You're good with them," Theo observed. "Most people are nervous around chickens." Elena smiled. "They're just little dinosaurs, nothing to be afraid of." For the first time, Theo's serious expression cracked into something almost like a smile. "Never thought of them that way." They moved on to the goats, 5 of them, all curious and mischievous. One tried to eat Elena's shirt, making her laugh. The sound seemed to startle Theo, as if laughter was something unfamiliar on his farm. By the time they finished with all the animals, the sun was fully up. Elena's muscles ached pleasantly from the work. It felt good to be useful, to have a purpose, even if it was just for one morning. "Thank you for your help," Theo said as they headed back to the house. "You've done this before." "Not exactly," Elena admitted. "But I've had all kinds of jobs. You adapt or you don't survive. Theo gave her a long look. Come on, you must be hungry. In the kitchen, Theo proved to be a competent cook. He made eggs and bacon, toast with homemade jam and more coffee. Eleanor hadn't eaten a proper meal in days, and she had to stop herself from wolfing it down too quickly. This is delicious, she said between bites. Did you make this jam? Theo nodded. Blackberries grow wild on the south edge of the property. You're very self-sufficient here, Elena observed. Have to be, Theo replied. Town's too far for frequent trips. As they ate, Eleanor gathered her courage. About going to town, Theo set down his coffee cup. Right, I said I'd drive you. Actually, Eleanor began hesitantly, I was wondering if maybe I could stay a few more days. I could help around the farm, earn my keep until I figure out my next move. Theo's expression was unreadable. Eleanor rushed on, I'm a hard worker, and I learn fast. You saw that this morning. I won't get in your way, and I don't need much. Just a place to sleep and some food. She held her breath, waiting for his answer. Theo was under no obligation to help her. He'd already done more than most would by taking her in for one night. Theo was quiet for so long that Eleanor started to regret asking. Then he said, I could use the help with harvest coming up. The guest room is yours for as long as you need. Relief washed over Elena. Thank you. I promise I won't be a burden. One condition, Theo said, his voice firm. This isn't charity. You'll work and I'll pay you a fair wage. Elena hadn't expected that. You don't have to. I pay for work done on my farm, Theo cut in. That's how it is. Elena nodded, understanding his pride. All right. Thank you, Theo. After breakfast, Theo showed Elena around the property. Branca Luz Farm covered nearly 100 acres, with fields of hay, the small apple orchard, and pastures for the animals. There was even a vegetable garden. Behind the house, though Theo admitted he wasn't much of a gardener. My mother had the green thumb, he explained. I just tried to keep her plants alive. It was the first personal detail he'd shared, and Elena didn't press for more. Instead, she said, I know a bit about vegetable gardens. My grandmother had one when I was little. Theo looked at her with interest. Where did you grow up? All over, Elena said vaguely. My parents moved around a lot for work. After they died, I just kept moving. Theo didn't offer sympathy or ask questions, which Elena appreciated. Instead, he nodded and said, The garden could use someone who knows what they're doing. That afternoon, while Theo worked on repairing a fence, Elena spent hours in the vegetable garden, weeding and tidying. The work was peaceful, giving her time to think. She couldn't remember the last time she'd stayed in one place for more than a few weeks. The constant moving had become a habit, a way to avoid getting too attached or letting anyone get too close. But as she worked in the rich soil of Branca Luz Farm, Elena felt something unfamiliar stirring inside her, a longing to stay put, to build something lasting. That evening, after a simple dinner, Eleanor offered to wash the dishes. Theo didn't argue, just handed her a towel and moved to the living room, where he sat in an armchair with a book. As Elena washed the plates and cups, she noticed a worn cookbook on a shelf above the sink. Curious, she pulled it down. The cover read family recipes in faded script, and when she opened it, she found handwritten recipes in elegant penmanship. That was my mother's, Theo said from the doorway, startling her. I'm sorry, Elena said quickly, closing the book. I shouldn't have touched it. Theo shook his head. It's fine. She would have liked that someone was interested in her recipes. Elena carefully placed the cookbook back on the shelf. She sounds like an amazing cook. She was, Theo said, a softness in his voice Eleanor hadn't heard before. She taught me everything I know about cooking and about running this farm. Is she... Elena trailed off, unsure how to ask. She passed away 5 years ago, Theo said. Heart attack, it was quick at least. I'm sorry, Elena said sincerely. Theo nodded, then changed the subject. There's a stack of old magazines in the living room if you're bored. No TV reception. Out here, but there's a radio. Actually, Elena said, would it be all right if I looked at your mother's cookbook some more? I've always wanted to learn proper cooking. Something changed in Theo's face. A slight softening around the eyes, a barely perceptible relaxation of his shoulders. Sure, he said, she'd like that. That night, as Eleanor lay in bed with the cookbook beside her, she realized that Theo Silvera was a mystery. He lived alone on this beautiful farm, kept mostly to himself, and seemed unused to having company. Yet there was a gentleness beneath his gruff exterior, a kindness that showed in small ways. The dry clothes, the rubber boots, the way he'd included her in the morning chores without making her feel like a burden. What had happened to make him so solitary? And why did the farm sometimes feel like it was waiting for something or someone to bring it fully to life as... Elena drifted off to sleep. She wondered if she might stay long enough to find out. Days turned into a week, and Elena settled into life at Branca Luz farm. Each morning, she helped Theo with the animals. During the day, she worked in the vegetable garden, which was flourishing under her care, or helped with whatever chores needed doing. In the evenings, she experimented with recipes from the cookbook, delighting in Theo's surprised appreciation. When she served up his mother's beef stew or apple cake, they didn't talk much. Theo wasn't a man of many words, and Elena had learned long ago not to share too much of herself. But there was a comfortable rhythm to their days, a sense of purpose that Elena had been missing for a long time. One evening, while looking for a sweater in the guest room closet, Elena found an old coat pushed to the back. It was a woman's coat, well made but showing signs of age. She took it out carefully, wondering who it had belonged to. Theo's mother, perhaps, or someone else. Eleanor folded the coat gently and placed it on the shelf, whispering, "Thank you," to whoever had left it behind. This farm had a history, stories she didn't know, and Elena was beginning to feel that she was becoming a small part of its ongoing tale. The next morning, as they worked together in the barn, Theo said, "Harvest starts next week. It'll be hard work." "I'm ready," Elena assured him. Theo nodded. "I usually hire day laborers from town, but..." He hesitated. "With you here, maybe we can manage with just 1 or 2 extras." Elena felt a strange warmth spread through her chest. It was the first time Theo had suggested she might be more than just a temporary guest. "I'd like that," she said softly. Theo looked at her, really looked at her, for perhaps the first time. "You're different from what I expected." "What did you expect?" Elena asked. Theo shrugged. "Someone who'd take the first chance to leave." Elena thought about all the places she'd been, all the times she'd moved on without looking back. "Maybe I'm tired of leaving," she said honestly. The air between them shifted, charged with something neither was ready to name. Then Theo cleared his throat and turned back to his work. "Storm's coming tonight," he said. "Better make sure everything's secured." But as they worked side by side to prepare the farm for the coming weather, Eleanor felt something changing, like the first hint of spring after a long winter. She'd arrived at Branca Luz farm cold, wet and alone. Now, for the first time in years, Elena felt warm, not just on the outside, but deep within where it mattered most. And as the first raindrops began to fall, she found herself hoping that this storm might keep her here a little longer. The harvest season arrived at Branca Luz farm with golden sunshine and crisp morning air. Elena had been at the farm for nearly 3 weeks now, and each day made it harder to imagine leaving. She had transformed the overgrown vegetable garden into neat rows of produce, learned every animal's quirks, and memorized the creaks and groans of the old farmhouse. Most importantly, she had begun to understand Theo. His silences weren't cold but thoughtful. His routine wasn't rigid but comforting. And occasionally, when she made him laugh with a silly joke or story, his entire face transformed, revealing the man beneath the serious exterior. "We'll start picking apples today," Theo announced at breakfast. "I called in 2 workers from town to help, but it'll still be a long day." Eleanor nodded, pouring them both more coffee. "I've never picked apples before, but I'm a quick learner." "I know you are," Theo said, and there was something in his voice that made Elena look up. He quickly averted his eyes. "Jim and Pete should be here by 7. They work the harvest circuit around the valley." The 2 men arrived in a battered pickup truck, just as Elena was feeding the chickens. Jim was older, probably in his 60s, with weathered skin and kind eyes. Pete was younger, maybe 30, with an easy smile and a confident manner. "Well, well," Pete said when Theo introduced Elena. "Theo Silvera actually has a woman on his farm. Never thought I'd see the day." Theo's face hardened. "Elena works here, Let's get started. Pete raised his eyebrows, but didn't comment further. Jim gave Elena a friendly nod and followed Theo to the orchard, where wooden ladders were already set up among the trees. The work was harder than Elena expected, climbing up and down ladders, carefully picking apples and placing them in the bags strapped across her chest, then emptying the bags into wooden crates. It all required strength and coordination. By mid-morning, her arms ached, and she had scratches from the branches. "You're doing great," Jim told her during a water break. "First day's always the hardest." "Thanks," Elena said, wiping sweat from her forehead. "I've had plenty of jobs, but never this one." "How'd you end up at Branca Luz?" Pete asked, joining them. "Theo's not exactly known for his hospitality." Elena hesitated. "I got caught in a storm. Theo let me stay the night, and then I started helping around the farm." Pete looked skeptical. "Must be doing more than helping around the farm to still be here." "That's enough, Pete," Jim said sharply. Elena felt her cheeks burn. "It's not like that. Theo's been a gentleman." Pete shrugged. "Just saying, he's been alone ever since—" "I said that's enough," Jim cut in. "Let's get back to work." The rest of the morning passed in uncomfortable silence. Elena worked twice as hard, determined to prove her worth. By lunchtime, she had filled more crates than either Pete or Jim. When they broke for lunch, Theo joined them, bringing sandwiches and cold lemonade to the orchard. He noticed Elena's red hands and the scratches on her arms. "You should have taken gloves," he said, frowning. "I'm fine," Elena assured him. "Just getting used to it." Theo disappeared back to the house and returned with a jar of salve. "For the scratches," he said, handing it to her. "My mother's recipe. Works better than anything from the store." The gesture wasn't lost on Jim and Pete, who exchanged glances. Elena felt self-conscious but grateful. "Thank you," she said, applying the cool salve to her arms. It smelled of herbs and honey. After lunch, Theo announced, "Elena, you can help me sort the apples by the barn. Jim and Pete can handle the picking this afternoon." Elena followed Theo to the barn, where tables had been set up for sorting apples by size and quality. "I'm sorry about Pete," she said, once they were alone. "He seems to have the wrong idea about us." Theo's jaw tightened. "Pete talks too much, always has." "He was going to say something about why you've been alone," Elena ventured cautiously. Jim stopped him. Theo was silent for a long moment, focusing on the apples in front of him. Then he said, "There was someone once, it didn't work out." Elena nodded, not pushing for more. "I understand." Theo looked at her. "Do you?" "I've had my share of disappointments," Elena said simply. Something passed between them, a recognition of shared pain, of lessons learned the hard way. Theo nodded once, and they returned to sorting apples in a comfortable silence. That evening, after Jim and Pete had gone and dinner was finished, Elena found Theo on the porch, staring out at the darkening sky. She brought him a cup of coffee and joined him, sitting on the wooden step below his chair. "Thank you," he said, taking the coffee. "For today. You worked hard." "I enjoyed it," Elena said honestly. "It feels good to see the results of your work. Right in front of you." Theo made a sound of agreement. They sat in silence for a while, watching as stars appeared one by one in the night sky. "Her name was Rebecca," Theo said suddenly. "We were engaged 3 years ago." Elena held her breath, afraid that any response might make him stop. "She was from the city," Theo continued. "We met when she came to write an article about small farms. She loved Branca Luz, said it was exactly what she'd been looking for, peace, quiet, a simpler life." He took a sip of coffee. "We planned to get married in the spring. I added the east wing to the house for her, a studio where she could write. But then winter came, and the reality of farm life set in. The isolation, the endless work, the quiet she'd loved became too quiet." "She left?" Elena asked softly. Theo nodded. "Said she couldn't do it. Couldn't imagine herself growing old here, cut off from the world." His voice hardened. "She wanted me to sell the farm, move to the city with her. This farm has been in my family for 4 generations. I couldn't leave it." "So you chose the farm," Elena said, understanding. "And she chose the city," Theo finished. "Can't blame her, really. Farm life isn't for everyone." Elena thought about her own life. the endless moving, never staying in one place long enough to put down roots. "I think people are often looking for the wrong things," she said. "They want excitement or comfort or security, but they don't realize that what they really need is purpose. Something that matters." Theo looked at her, his eyes reflecting the starlight. "And what are you looking for, Elena Costa?" Elena smiled softly. "Right now, a place where I can be useful, where the work I do matters." "You've found that here," Theo said. It wasn't a question. "Yes," Elena agreed. "I think I have." The next morning, Pete arrived alone. "Jim's got a bad back today," he explained, "but I brought my cousin Maria to help instead." Maria was a pretty young woman with long, dark hair and bright eyes. She smiled warmly at Theo. "It's been a while, Theo. Farm's looking good." "Thanks," Theo said, his manner polite but distant. "We're finishing the north section today." As they walked to the orchard, Elena noticed how Maria stayed close to Theo, asking him questions and laughing at his brief responses. A strange feeling twisted in Elena's stomach, something she hadn't felt in a long time. Jealousy. The feeling intensified throughout the morning as Maria made it clear she was interested in Theo. She constantly asked for his help reaching apples or carrying crates, even though she was obviously capable on her own. "Theo and I went to high school together," Maria told Elena as they worked side by side. "He was the quiet, handsome boy all the girls had crushes on." "I can imagine," Elena said non-committally. Maria glanced toward where Theo was working with Pete. "He's been alone too long since that city girl broke his heart. Everyone in town says so." Elena concentrated on picking apples. "Theo seems content with his life," Maria laughed. "No one's content being alone, honey, especially not a man like Theo." She lowered her voice. "So what's your story? You just passing through?" The question hit a nerve. Was she just passing through? Elena had never stayed anywhere this long in years, but she had no claim on Brancalus farm or on Theo. "I'm helping with the harvest," Elena said carefully. "After that, I'm not sure." Maria nodded knowingly. "Well, just so you know, half the single women in Pinewood Valley have been trying to get Theo's attention since Rebecca left. None of them have succeeded." The conversation left Elena unsettled. She worked silently for the rest of the morning, watching as Maria continued her efforts to engage Theo. To his credit, Theo remained politely distant, but he didn't discourage her either. By lunchtime, Elena's mood had darkened. She begged off joining the others, claiming a headache, and retreated to the house. In the quiet kitchen, she made herself a sandwich and tried to sort through her feelings. What right did she have to feel jealous? Theo had given her a job and a place to stay, nothing more. If he wanted to reconnect with someone from his past, someone who knew the area and understood farm life, that was his business. Yet the thought of leaving Brancalus, of leaving Theo, made her heart ache in a way she hadn't expected. The screen door creaked open, and Theo stepped into the kitchen. "You okay?" Elena nodded, forcing a smile. "Just needed a break. It's hot out there." Theo studied her face. "Maria bothering you?" "No," Elena said quickly. "She's nice. You two have history." "Ancient history," Theo corrected. "We were kids." Elena busied herself with cleaning up her lunch plate. "She seems interested in rekindling that history." "Maria's interested in the farm," Theo said bluntly. "Her family lost theirs 10 years ago. She's been trying to get back to that life ever since." "Oh," Elena said, feeling foolish. Theo moved closer. "So you don't have to worry about Maria." Elena looked up at him, surprised by his directness. "I wasn't worried." A ghost of a smile touched Theo's lips. "No?" Elena felt her cheeks warm. "Maybe a little." The moment stretched between them, full of unspoken possibilities. Then the screen door banged open again as Pete called out, "Theo, we've got a problem with one of the ladders." The spell broken, Theo stepped back. "Coming," he called, then said quietly to Elena, "Take your time. Join us when you're ready." After he left, Elena stood in the kitchen, her heart racing. What was happening between them? And more importantly, what would happen when the harvest was over? The rest of the day passed in a blur of activity. By sunset, they had finished the north section of the orchard. Pete and Maria left, with Maria promising to return the next day. She's got a crush on you, Elena said as she and Theo cleaned up after dinner. Theo shook his head. Maria's practical. She wants a farm security. I happen to have both. That doesn't mean she doesn't like you, Elena pointed out. You're a good man, Theo. Kind, hard-working, honest. Theo looked uncomfortable with the praise. I'm just doing what needs to be done. That's exactly what I mean, Elena said softly. Later that night, unable to sleep, Elena wandered into the living room. The old bookshelf in the corner caught her attention. She ran her fingers along the spines of worn volumes, classics, farming manuals, and several photo albums. Curious, she pulled out one of the albums and opened it. Inside were pictures of a younger Theo with an older couple who must have been his parents. They stood in front of the farmhouse, smiling proudly. In another photo, a teenage Theo sat on a tractor, looking serious but pleased. Elena turned the pages, watching Theo grow up through the photos. Then she came to a section with pictures of Theo and a beautiful blonde woman. They were standing in the orchard, by the barn, on the porch, always smiling, always touching. Rebecca. In the last photo, Rebecca stood in front of what must have been the east wing Theo had mentioned, her writing studio. She was beaming, and Theo had his arm around her waist, looking at her with such love that it made Elena's heart ache. That was taken a week before she left. Elena jumped, nearly dropping the album. Theo stood in the doorway, wearing pajama, pants and a t-shirt, his hair tousled from sleep. I'm sorry, Elena said, closing the album. I couldn't sleep and I was curious. Theo crossed the room and sat beside her on the couch. It's okay, Elena handed him the album. You looked happy. I was, Theo said, looking at the photo. We both were for a while. He closed the album and set it aside. But it wasn't real. She was in love with the idea of farm life, not the reality of it. And you, Elena asked, were you in love with her or the idea of her? Theo considered the question. Both, maybe. I loved her, but I also loved what she represented, a chance at a family, a future for the farm. The farm means everything to you, Elena observed. It's all I've ever known, Theo said. My great-grandfather built this house with his own hands. My grandfather expanded the orchard. My father modernized the equipment. Every generation has added something, made it better for the next. And what will you add? Elena asked. Theo was quiet for a moment. I don't know yet. For a while, after Rebecca left, I just focused on survival, keeping things going. He looked at Elena. Until recently, Elena's heart quickened. What changed? Theo's eyes held hers. You showed up in the storm. The simple words hung in the air between them, charged with meaning. Elena hardly dared to breathe. Theo, she began, but he stood suddenly. It's late, he said. We have an early start tomorrow. Elena nodded, trying to hide her disappointment. Good night, Theo. He paused at the doorway. Elena, he said, his voice low. I'm glad you got caught in that storm. Then he was gone, leaving Elena alone with the photo albums and her racing thoughts. The harvest continued for the next 5 days. Pete came each day, sometimes with Jim, sometimes with Maria. Elena worked harder than she ever had, determined to prove her worth to the farm and to Theo. Each evening she cooked dinner using recipes from his mother's cookbook, delighting in Theo's obvious enjoyment of the meals. They fell into a comfortable routine, working together during the day, sharing quiet evenings on the porch or by the fireplace. But something had shifted between them since that night with the photo album. There was a new awareness, a tension that hadn't been there before. Theo's eyes lingered on her when he thought she wasn't looking. Elena found herself watching the way his hands moved as he worked, the way his rare smiles transformed his face. The final day of the harvest, Elena woke before dawn. She slipped out of bed and went to the kitchen to prepare a special breakfast. Using his mother's recipe, she made cinnamon rolls from scratch, filling the house with a warm, sweet aroma. Theo appeared in the doorway just as she was taking the rolls out of the oven. Smells amazing, he said, his voice still rough with sleep. Elena smiled. I wanted to celebrate the last day of harvest. They ate breakfast together as the sun rose, casting golden light across the kitchen. We should finish by noon, Theo said. Pete and Jim won't be coming today. It's just us for the last section. I can handle it, Eleanor assured him. The work went quickly with just the two of them. They had developed an easy rhythm over the past week, anticipating each other's movements, working in tandem without needing to speak. By 11, they had filled the last crates with apples. Elena stood back, surveying their work with satisfaction. "We did it," Theo nodded, wiping sweat from his brow. "Couldn't have done it without you." The simple praise warmed Elena more than any elaborate compliment could have. "What happens now?" she asked. "Tomorrow I'll take the first batch to the market in town," Theo said. "The rest will go to the processing plant for cider and preserves." Elena nodded, suddenly aware that her role on the farm had come to its natural conclusion. The harvest was over. There would be less work now, less need for an extra pair of hands. "I should start thinking about moving on," she said, trying to keep her voice light. Theo's head snapped up. "What?" "The harvest is finished," Elena pointed. "Out. You won't need as much help now." Theo stared at her. "Is that what you think? That I only wanted your help with the harvest?" Elena hesitated. "I don't want to assume anything." Theo stepped closer. "Elena, you've done more for this farm. For me than just help with the harvest. You've brought life back to places that were empty." Elena's heart hammered in her chest. "Theo, I don't want you to go," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "The farm needs you. I need you." Elena hardly dared to believe what she was hearing. "Are you sure? I don't have anything to offer except hard work and—" "That's not true," Theo interrupted. "You offer warmth, kindness. You see the beauty in simple things." He gestured to the farm around them. "You see value in what I've built here." "Of course I do," Elena said. "This place is special. You've created something real, something lasting." Theo took another step toward her. "Stay, Elena, not as a worker, as whatever this is becoming between us." Elena felt tears prick her eyes. No one had ever asked her to stay before. No one had ever wanted her to put down roots, to be part of something permanent. "I've spent my whole life moving from place to place," she said softly, "never belonging anywhere." "You belong here," Theo said firmly, "if you want to." Elena looked around at the orchard, the farmhouse, the barn, at the life Theo had built and was now offering to share with her. For the first time in years, she felt no urge to run, no fear of staying too long. "I want to," she whispered. Theo's face broke into a real smile, not the small hesitant one she'd seen before, but one that lit his entire face. He reached out and took her hand, his calloused fingers warm against hers. "You showed up in the storm," he said, "but somehow it feels like you brought spring with you." Elena squeezed his hand, unable to find words for the emotion welling up inside her. This strange, quiet man had offered her something she'd never had before, not just shelter from the storm, but a place to belong, a purpose, a future. As they walked hand in hand back to the farmhouse, Elena knew that the harvest was over, but something new was just beginning to bloom at Branca Luz farm. A month had passed since the end of the harvest, and fall was giving way to the first hints of winter at Branca Luz farm. The mornings were crisp, the evenings chilly enough to warrant a fire in the stone fireplace. Elena had never been happier. She and Theo had fallen into a comfortable routine. They worked side by side during the day, caring for the animals, preparing the farm for winter, and processing the last of the apples into preserves and cider. In the evenings, they would cook dinner together, then sit by the fire, sometimes talking, sometimes just enjoying each other's company in comfortable silence. There was a new ease between them, a quiet understanding that neither had put into words yet. Theo smiled more often now. He had even begun to teach Elena how to drive the tractor, trusting her with the machinery he had once told her was too expensive to risk. On this particular morning, Elena woke to the smell of coffee and bacon. Unusual, since she was typically the first one up and responsible for breakfast. She pulled on a sweater, one of Theo's old ones that he had given her when the weather turned cold, and made her way to the kitchen. Theo stood at the stove, flipping pancakes with surprising skill. He looked up when she entered, a smile spreading across his face. "Morning. Thought I'd let you sleep in for once." "What's the occasion?" Elena asked, pouring herself a cup of coffee. "It's market day," Theo replied. Thought we could go into town together. Elena paused mid-sip. In all the time she'd been at Brancalus, she had never gone to town with Theo. He always made the trips alone, returning with supplies and whatever else they needed. You want me to come with you? She asked. Theo nodded, sliding a stack of pancakes onto a plate. About time you saw more than just this farm. Besides, he added, not quite meeting her eyes, there are some people I'd like you to meet. Elena felt a flutter of nerves. Meeting people meant becoming official in some way, acknowledged, as part of Theo's life, not just a worker on his farm. I'd love to, she said, smiling to hide her anxiety. After breakfast, Elena changed into her best clothes, which wasn't saying much. She had arrived at Brancalus with only what she could carry in one small bag. Over the weeks, Theo had given her some of his mother's old clothes that he'd kept stored away, but none of them were exactly stylish. Looking at herself in the small mirror above her dresser, Eleanor frowned. Her dark hair had grown longer during her time at the farm, and while it was clean and brushed, it lacked the polished look of someone like Maria. Her hands were rough from farm work, her complexion tanned from days in the sun. You ready? Theo called from the hallway. Coming, Elena replied, taking one last critical look at herself before turning away from the mirror. Theo was waiting by the front door, keys in hand. He wore his usual jeans and work boots, but had exchanged his typical flannel shirt for a clean button-down. His dark hair was neatly combed, and he had trimmed his stubble. You look nice, Elena said, suddenly self-conscious about her own appearance. Theo's eyes swept over her, lingering in a way that made her cheeks warm. So do you. The drive to town took about 40 minutes along winding country roads. Elena watched as the landscape changed from isolated farmland to scattered houses, and finally to the small town of Pinewood Valley. It wasn't much, a main street lined with shops, a town square with a gazebo, a few side streets with modest homes. But to Elena, who had only seen the farm for weeks, it felt like a bustling metropolis. We'll stop at the farmer's market first, Theo said, parking his truck near the town square. The market was set up with about 20 stalls selling everything, from fresh vegetables to handmade quilts. Theo led Elena to an empty spot where a wooden sign reading Brancalus Farm hung from a metal frame. I reserved this space weeks ago, he explained, as he began unloading crates of apples and jars of preserves from the truck. Harvest time is when I make most of my income for the year. Helena helped him set up the stall, arranging the apples by variety and displaying the preserves his mother's recipes had inspired her to make. She felt a sense of pride seeing the farm's name displayed, knowing she had contributed to the bounty laid out before them. As the market opened and customers began to arrive, Elena found herself enjoying the interactions. She explained the difference between apple varieties to curious shoppers, recommended preserves based on their preferences, and even handed out samples of the apple cider they had made together. Theo stood back, watching her with an expression that mingled surprise and admiration. When there was a lull in customers, he said, "You're a natural at this." Eleanor shrugged. "I've had all kinds of jobs. You learn to talk to people." "It's more than that," Theo insisted. "You genuinely care. People can tell." Before Elena could respond, a woman's voice called out, "Theo Silveira, I was beginning to think you'd become a complete hermit." They turned to see an elegant older woman approaching the stall. Her silver hair was styled in a neat bob, and she carried herself with obvious confidence. "Mrs. Reynolds," Theo greeted, her with a respectful nod. "Good to see you." "And who is this?" Mrs. Reynolds asked, turning her sharp gaze to Eleanor. "This is Elena Costa," Theo said. "She's been helping me at the farm." Elena extended her hand. "Nice to meet you, Mrs. Reynolds." The older woman took Elena's hand, her grip surprisingly firm. "Margaret Reynolds. I own the bookstore down the street." She studied Eleanor with undisguised curiosity. "So you're the reason our Theo has been smiling more these days?" Eleanor felt herself blush. "I just help around the farm." Mrs. Reynolds hummed, clearly unconvinced. "Well, it's about time Theo had some pleasant company out there. That place has been too quiet since his mother passed." She turned back to Theo. "Will you be bringing Eleanor to the Harvest Festival next weekend?" Theo looked uncomfortable. "I haven't decided if we're going." Nonsense, Mrs. Reynolds said firmly. It's tradition. Your family hasn't missed a harvest festival in 40 years. She winked at Elena. Besides, it's the perfect opportunity to introduce your young lady to everyone properly. After Mrs. Reynolds left with her purchases, Elena raised an eyebrow at Theo. Harvest festival, Theo sighed. It's a town tradition, dancing, food, games, everyone goes. And you don't want to, Elena guessed. Theo was quiet for a moment. I used to enjoy it, but after Rebecca, well, I haven't gone the last couple of years. Elena understood. The festival held memories, associations with his former fiancée. We don't have to go, she said gently. Theo looked at her, his expression softening. Would you want to? The truth was, Eleanor was intrigued by the idea of a community celebration. In her years of moving from place to place, she had rarely stayed anywhere long enough to participate in local traditions. I think it sounds nice, she admitted, but only if you're comfortable with it. Theo nodded slowly. Maybe it's time I started making new memories there. The rest of the market day passed quickly. Eleanor met more of the townspeople, including Jim's wife Clara, who ran the local diner, and the town doctor, who had delivered Theo when he was born. Everyone seemed curious about her, but kind in their interest. Around noon, Theo suggested they take a break for lunch. Clara's diner has the best food in town, he said. I'll watch the stall if you want to bring something back. I can go, Elena offered, secretly eager to explore the town a bit. The diner was bustling with the lunch crowd when Elena entered. Clara spotted her immediately and waved her over to the counter. Elena, wonderful to see you again, she said warmly. What can I get for you and Theo? Elena ordered sandwiches and coffee to go, then sat at the counter to wait. She couldn't help overhearing the conversation at a nearby table. That's her, the woman staying at Brancaluz, a female voice said in a poorly concealed whisper. Maria says she just showed up during a storm and never left. Well, she certainly worked fast, another woman replied, getting Theo Silvera to bring her to town, introduce her around. Rebecca couldn't even manage that until they were engaged. I heard she has no family, no roots anywhere, the first woman continued. Probably saw a lonely man with a nice farm and decided to make herself at home. Elena felt her cheeks burn with humiliation. She kept her eyes fixed on the counter, wishing the floor would open up and swallow her. Ladies, Clara's sharp voice cut through the gossip. If you're finished with your meal, your check is ready. There was an awkward shuffling as the women paid and left. When they were gone, Clara came over to Elena with the takeout bag. Don't pay any attention to Donna and Patty, she said kindly. They've been stirring up trouble in this town since high school. Elena tried to smile. It's fine, I'm used to people making assumptions. Clara studied her with shrewd eyes. Theo Silvera doesn't bring just anyone to town, honey. In fact, since Rebecca left, you're the first. That means something. Eleanor took the bag of food. Thank you, Clara. As she walked back to the market, Eleanor couldn't shake the women's words from her mind. Was that what everyone thought, that she was some opportunist who had latched onto Theo for his farm and security? Theo noticed her subdued mood as soon as she returned. Everything okay? He asked as they ate their sandwiches between customers. Fine, Elena said quickly. Just tired, I guess. Theo didn't look convinced, but he didn't press the issue. By late afternoon, they had sold almost all of their produce. As they packed up the few remaining items, Theo said, I need to stop by the bank before we head home. Won't take long. Eleanor nodded, still distracted by the conversation she had overheard. As they walked down the main street toward the bank, Theo surprised her by taking her hand. His calloused fingers entwined with hers, warm and secure. The simple gesture made Elena's heart swell. Whatever the town gossips might think, what was growing between her and Theo was real. At the bank, Theo was greeted by name. Mr. Silvera, good to see you, the manager said. And who is this? Elena Costa, Theo replied, still holding her hand. She's with me. The manager's eyebrows rose slightly at Theo's possessive tone, but he smiled politely. Pleasure to meet. You, Miss Costa. Mr. Silvera, I have those papers you requested last week. Theo nodded. I'll just be a few minutes, he told Elena. While Theo spoke with the manager in his office, Elena waited in the lobby. She noticed a community bulletin board covered with flyers and announcements. One in particular caught her eye, a job posting for an assistant at the town library. The position offered modest pay, but included housing above the library. Elena stared at the flyer, conflicting emotions churning inside her. Part of her, the part that had spent years being self-sufficient, never depending on anyone, was drawn to the idea of having her own income, her own place. But another part, the part that had grown to love Brancaleuse farm and the man who owned it, recoiled at the thought of leaving. "Ready?" Elena jumped at Theo's voice. She quickly stepped away from the bulletin board. "All done?" Theo nodded, his expression unreadable. "Let's head home." The drive back to the farm was quiet. Elena looked out the window, watching as the town gave way to open countryside. She felt Theo glance at her a few times, but he didn't. Break the silence. Finally, as they turned onto the long driveway leading to Brancaleuse, Theo said, "You've been quiet since lunch. Did something happen in town?" Elena hesitated, then decided to be honest. "I overheard some women talking in the diner. About me. About us." Theo's jaw tightened. "What did they say?" "That I'm taking advantage of you," Elena said softly. "That I saw a lonely man with a nice farm and decided to make myself at home." Theo pulled the truck to a stop in front of the farmhouse and turned to face her. "And do you care what they think?" "I care what you think," Elena replied. "I don't want you to doubt why I'm here." Theo's expression softened. "Elena, I know exactly why you're here. You're here because you have nowhere else to go." Elena flinched at his blunt assessment. "And I'm glad for it," Theo continued, his voice gentle. "Because I had nowhere else to turn either. This farm was just a place, just work, until you showed up. Now it's becoming a home again." Elena felt tears prick her eyes. "Theo." He reached out and touched her cheek. "Let them talk. They don't know anything about us." The simple touch, the quiet conviction in his voice melted something inside Elena. She leaned into his hand, letting herself believe that maybe, just maybe, she had finally found where she belonged. The week leading up to the Harvest Festival was busy at Brancaleuse farm. There was the regular work of caring for the animals and maintaining the property, plus additional preparations for winter. Theo spent 2 days repairing the roof of the barn, while Elena cleaned the gutters and stacked firewood near the house. Through it all, a new closeness grew between them. Theo began to share more stories about his childhood on the farm, his parents, his dreams for the future. Elena, in turn, opened up about her own past, the parents who had moved constantly, never putting down roots, the grandmother who had briefly given her stability before passing away, the series of jobs and temporary homes that had followed. "I never stayed anywhere long enough to call it home," she admitted one evening as they sat by the fire. "It was easier to keep moving than to get attached and then have to leave." Theo considered this, and now? Elena looked around the warm living room, at the cookbook on the shelf that she used almost daily, at the quilt she had mended that now draped over the couch. "Now I'm afraid to hope that this could be permanent," she said honestly. "That I could stay." Theo took her hand, his eyes serious. "I want you to stay, Elena, for as long as you want." The sincerity in his voice made her breath catch. "What if I want to stay forever?" A slow smile spread across Theo's face. "Then, we better get you some more clothes. You can't keep wearing my mother's old things forever." The night before the Harvest Festival, Elena faced a dilemma. She had nothing suitable to wear to a dance. The few dresses among his mother's clothes were outdated and didn't fit her well. She was contemplating her limited options when there was a knock at her bedroom door. "Elena?" Theo called. "Can I come in?" "Of course," she replied, opening the door. Theo stood there holding a large box. "This is for you," he said, looking uncharacteristically nervous. "For tomorrow night." Elena took the box and set it on the bed. When she opened it, she gasped. Inside was a beautiful deep blue dress, simple but elegant, with long sleeves and a flowing skirt. "Theo," she breathed, "it's beautiful." "I had Mrs. Reynolds help me pick it out," he admitted. "There's a shop in town that sells dresses. I guessed at your size." Elena lifted the dress from the box, holding it against herself. How did you know I was worried about what to wear? Theo shrugged, a small smile playing at his lips. I noticed you looking through my mother's old clothes. Thought you might want something of your own, something of your own. The word struck Elena deeply. She had owned so little in her life, had become accustomed to borrowed clothes and temporary possessions. Thank you, she said, her voice thick with emotion. Not just for the dress, for everything. Theo stepped closer, his eyes warm as they held hers. You've brought something back to Branca Luz that I thought was gone forever, he said softly. A sense of home, purpose, life. Slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wanted, he leaned down and pressed his lips to hers. The kiss was gentle, tentative, a question more than a demand. Elena answered by sliding her hands up to his shoulders and kissing him back. In that moment, all her doubts, all her fears about belonging, seemed to melt away. When they finally broke apart, Theo rested his forehead against hers. I've been wanting to do that for weeks, he admitted. Elena smiled. What took you so long? Theo chuckled, the sound rumbling through his chest. I was afraid you'd run, that it would be too much, too soon. I'm done running, Elena said firmly. This is where I want to be. They stood there, wrapped in each other's arms as the night deepened around Branca Luz farm. For the first time in her life, Elena felt truly warm, not just her body, but her heart, her soul. She had found her home not in a place, but in a person. The day of the harvest festival dawned clear and crisp. Elena woke early, a mixture of excitement and nervousness fluttering in her stomach. Today she would be officially introduced to the town as Theo's. What? Friend? Partner? They hadn't put a label on what they were to each other. After finishing the morning chores, Elena spent extra time getting ready. She washed her hair and let it dry in loose waves. The blue dress fit perfectly, highlighting her eyes and complementing her olive skin. When she finally emerged from her room, Theo was waiting in the living room. He wore dark pants and a crisp white shirt, his hair neatly combed. He looked up when she entered, and the expression that crossed his face made Elena's heart skip. How you look beautiful, he said, his voice rough with emotion. Elena smiled, suddenly shy. So do you. Handsome, I mean. Theo offered his arm. Ready to face the town? Elena took a deep breath and nodded. Ready. The town square had been transformed for the festival. Strings of lights hung between trees, tables lined the perimeter laden with food, and a wooden platform had been set up for dancing. Nearly everyone in Pinewood Valley seemed to be there, from small children running between tables to elderly couples sitting in chairs watching the proceedings. As Elena and Theo approached, conversations paused, heads turned. Elena felt the weight of dozens of curious gazes. Theo's hand tightened around hers. Ignore them, he murmured. Mrs. Reynolds was the first to approach them. Theo, Elena, so glad you could make it. She beamed at Elena. That dress is perfect on you, my dear. I told Theo it would be. Others soon joined them, Jim and Clara, the doctor and his wife, even Pete, who gave Elena a friendly nod. The initial awkwardness faded as people welcomed Theo back to the festival and made efforts to include Elena in conversations. They all care about you, Elena observed as they filled plates with food from the community tables. Theo looked surprised. I guess they do. I've been so focused on the farm, on my own problems, I didn't really notice. As the evening progressed, a small band began to play. Couples moved to the dance floor, swaying to the music. Would you like to dance? Theo asked hesitantly. Elena smiled. I'd love to. Theo led her to the dance floor and took her in his arms. They moved together easily, as if they had been dancing for years rather than for the first time. I haven't danced since Rebecca left, Theo admitted quietly. Elena looked up at him. Are you okay? Being here, I mean. Theo's eyes were clear as they met hers. More than okay. I'm making new memories, like I said. Better ones. As they danced, Elena caught sight of Maria watching them from the edge of the square. There was no malice in her expression, just a sort of resigned acceptance. When she noticed Elena looking, she raised her cup in a small salute. Everyone's watching us, Elena murmured. Let them, Theo replied. Let them see that Branca Luz farm isn't a place of sadness anymore, that we've moved on. The simple word filled Elena with warmth. She rested her head against Theo's chest, feeling his heartbeat strong and steady beneath her cheek. Later, as the evening was winding down, Theo led Elena away from the crowd to a quiet bench beneath an old oak tree. "There's something I need to ask you," he said, his expression serious. Elena's heart raced. "What is it?" "I saw you looking at the job posting in the bank," Theo said. "The one for the library assistant." Elena felt her cheeks flush. "I was just curious." "Elena," Theo said gently, "if you want your own job, your own place in town, I understand. I don't want you to stay at Branca Luz because you feel you have no other options." "That's not why I stay," Elena said quickly. "I know," Theo replied. "But I want you to choose to stay freely because it's what you want, not because you're grateful or because you have nowhere else to go." Eleanor looked at him, this man who had opened his door to her on a stormy night and, slowly but surely, had opened his heart as well. "I choose you," she said simply. "I choose Branca Luz Farm, not because I'm grateful, though I am. Not because I have nowhere else to go, though that's also true. But because for the first time in my life I feel like I'm where I'm supposed to be." Relief washed over Theo's face. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small box. "I've been carrying this around all day, trying to find the right moment," he said, opening the box to reveal a simple silver ring set with a small blue stone. "It was my grandmother's. My mother wore it until the day she died." Elena's breath caught. "I'm not asking you to marry me," Theo clarified quickly. "Not yet. That would be too soon. But I am asking you to think about a future here, with me, to give us time to see if this is really what you want." Tears blurred Elena's vision as she looked at the ring, at the man offering it to her. "It is what I want," she whispered. "It's all I want." Theo took the ring from the box and slipped it onto her finger. It fit perfectly as if it had been made for her. "I promise," he said, "that you'll never be cold again, not on your skin, not in your heart." Elena touched the ring, feeling its weight, its significance, a tether to this place, to this man, to a future she had never dared to imagine. "A promise," she agreed, leaning forward to seal it with a kiss. As they walked back to the truck hand in hand, Elena couldn't help but marvel at how much her life had changed in just a few short months. She had arrived at Branca Luz Farm with nothing but the clothes on her back and a lifetime of running behind her. Now she had a home, a purpose, and a heart full of possibilities. The night was cool as they drove back to the farm, but Elena wasn't. Cold. She didn't think she ever would be again. Winter had settled over Branca Luz Farm, transforming the landscape into a pristine wonderland of white. Snow blanketed the fields and orchard, icicles hung from the eaves of the farmhouse, and the world seemed hushed, peaceful. 3 months had passed since the harvest festival, and Elena could scarcely believe how much her life had changed. The silver ring with its blue stone rarely left her finger, a constant reminder of Theo's promise and her own choice to stay. The work on the farm had slowed with the winter season. The animals still needed tending, of course, and there were always repairs to be made, but the pace was gentler, allowing for quiet evenings by the fire and long conversations over home-cooked meals. Elena and Theo had fallen into a comfortable rhythm, their relationship deepening with each passing day. He had officially moved her into the master bedroom 2 weeks after the festival, his grandmother's quilt now covering their shared bed. The guest room where Elena had first stayed became a study where she kept her growing collection of books, borrowed from Mrs. Reynolds's store. On this particular morning, Elena stood at the kitchen window, watching as Theo cleared a path to the barn through the freshly fallen snow. A smile touched her lips as she observed the strong, steady movements of the man who had become the center of her world. The ring of the telephone broke the quiet. Eleanor wiped her hands on a dish towel and went to answer it. The farmhouse had only gotten a phone line a month ago, at Elena's gentle insistence that they needed a way to communicate in emergencies. "Branca Luz Farm, Elena speaking," she answered, still feeling a small thrill at claiming this place as her own. "Elena Costa?" a woman's voice asked. "This is Marjorie Davis from the Westridge Hotel Group." Elena frowned, the name vaguely familiar. "Yes, this is Elena." I'm calling about your application for our hospitality management program, the woman continued. I apologize for the delay in getting back to you. Your file was misplaced during our office move, Elena suddenly remembered. Nearly a year ago, before she'd found herself stranded in the storm that led her to Branca Luz, she had applied for a prestigious management training program with the Westridge Hotel Group. It had been her dream job, a chance for stability, career advancement, and a permanent address in a city where she could finally build a life. Ms. Costa, Marjorie prompted when Elena didn't respond. Yes, I'm here, Elena said quickly. I'm just surprised. It's been so long, I assumed I wasn't selected. Actually, you were our top candidate, Marjorie replied. Your experience in various hospitality roles made you exactly what we were looking for. We've been trying to track you down for weeks. Elena's heart began to race. I see. The position is still available if you're interested, Marjorie continued. It includes full training, competitive salary, benefits, and housing in San Francisco. We'd need you to start in 2 weeks. San Francisco, a world away from Branca Luz Farm from Teo. This is unexpected, Elena managed. I understand it's sudden, Marjorie said sympathetically. But this is a remarkable opportunity, Ms. Costa, the kind people wait years for. We'd need your answer by Friday. Today was Tuesday. 3 days to make a decision that would change the course of her life. I'll call you back, Elena promised, writing down the number Marjorie provided. After hanging up, Elena sank into a kitchen chair, her mind spinning. The Westridge program had been everything she'd wanted before the storm, before Branca Luz, before Theo. Security, advancement, a chance to use her skills in a profession she enjoyed. But now, the back door opened, and Theo stomped in, bringing with him a gust of cold air and the scent of snow. It's coming down harder, he reported, brushing snowflakes from his coat. Might need to bring the goats into the barn tonight if it keeps up. He paused when he saw Elena's face. What's wrong? Elena took a deep breath. I just got a phone call from the Westridge Hotel Group. Theo hung his coat by the door and came to sit across from her. What did they want? Slowly, Elena explained about the management program she had applied for, the opportunity it represented, and the deadline for her decision. As she spoke, she watched Theo's expression change, from confusion to understanding to a carefully controlled neutrality that broke her heart. San Francisco, he said when she finished, his voice even. That's a long way from here. Elena nodded, tears threatening. Theo, I applied for this job before I met you, before all of this. It was what I thought I wanted. And now? He asked. Quietly, Elena looked down at her ring, at the symbol of the promise they had made to each other. I don't know, she admitted. This job, it's the kind of security I've been searching for my whole life. A chance to build a career, to have something. That's mine. Theo was silent for a long moment. Then he reached across the table and took her hand, his thumb brushing over the ring. Branca Luz could be yours too, he said softly. If you want it to be. Elena's eyes widened. What do you mean? Theo took a deep breath. I was planning to do this differently, with more romance, I guess, but now seems like the right time. He squeezed her hand. Elena Costa, will you marry me? Become my partner in every way, in life, in love, in running this farm? Eleanor's breath caught. Though they had been living as a couple for months, though the ring on her finger was a promise of a future together, they had never spoken directly of marriage. Theo, she whispered, tears spilling onto her cheeks. I won't hold you here, he said, echoing the words from the night they had first admitted their feelings. If San Francisco is what you want, what you need, I won't stand in your way. But if you stay, I'll build a home that never lets you feel cold again. Not on your skin, not in your heart. Elena felt torn in two. The job in San Francisco represented everything she had once wanted. Independence, security, a chance to prove herself in the world. But Theo, Branca Luz Farm, the life they had begun to build together, that was everything she had never known. She needed. I need to think, she said finally. This is all happening so fast. Theo nodded, releasing her hand. Take all the time you need. But the hurt in his eyes was unmistakable, as he rose and went back outside to finish his chores. That evening, dinner was a quiet affair. Neither Eleanor nor Theo seemed able to find the words to bridge the sudden gap between them. After they ate, Eleanor washed the dishes while Theo built a fire in the living room. As she dried the last plate, Eleanor found herself staring at her mother's cookbook on the shelf. She had made one of the recipes tonight, a hearty stew that had become Theo's favorite. The book was worn from use now, the pages marked with her own notes alongside the original instructions. It struck her suddenly how much of herself she had invested in this place. Her touches were everywhere. In the garden now dormant under the snow, in the reorganized pantry and the curtains she had sewn for the living room windows. She wasn't just living at Brancalus, she was building it, shaping it, adding her own chapter to its story. In the living room, Theo sat in his armchair staring into the fire. Elena sat across from him on the couch, pulling her grandmother's quilt around her shoulders. "Tell me about San Francisco," Theo said suddenly. "What would you do there?" Elena was surprised by the question. "The program trains managers for their hotel chain. I'd learn everything. Front desk operations, housekeeping management, food and beverage service. After a year, I'd be placed as an assistant manager at one of their properties." "You'd be good at it," Theo said with a sad smile. "You're organized, hard-working, good with people." "I've never lived in a big city," Elena admitted. "Always small towns, rural areas." "You might love it," Theo said, though the words seemed to cost him. The excitement, the opportunities, all those people, places to go, things to see. Elena studied his face, understanding what he was doing. He was trying to help her see all sides, to make the choice that was truly best for her, even if it meant losing her. "What about you?" she asked. "Have you ever thought about living somewhere else?" Theo shook his head. "This farm is in my blood. 4 generations of Silveras have worked this land. I can't imagine being anywhere else." And that, Elena realized, was the crux of the problem. Theo was rooted here as firmly as the old oak tree in the front yard. If she took the job in San Francisco, she would be going alone. That night, as they lay side by side in bed, not touching, Eleanor stared at the ceiling and tried to imagine a life in San Francisco. She pictured herself in a smart uniform, managing a busy hotel, living in a modern apartment with city views. But every time she tried to focus on that image, it blurred and shifted, replaced by the reality she had come to love. Mornings feeding, the chickens, afternoons working in the garden, evenings cooking in the farmhouse kitchen with Theo by her side. The next day, Elena asked to borrow Theo's truck. "Where are you going?" he asked, handing her the keys. "To town," she replied. "I need to talk to someone." The drive to Pinewood Valley was slow on the snow-covered roads, but Elena welcomed the time alone with her thoughts. When she reached town, she parked in front of Mrs. Reynolds' bookstore and went inside. The older woman looked up from the counter, surprise and pleasure crossing her face. "Elena, what brings you into town in this weather?" Elena unwound her scarf. "I need some advice, Mrs. Reynolds, from someone who knows Theo. Who knows this place?" Over cups of tea in the back room of the bookstore, Eleanor explained her dilemma. Mrs. Reynolds listened without interrupting, her shrewd eyes taking in Elena's conflicted expression. "So," the older woman said when Elena finished, "you have a choice between a prestigious job in a big city or marriage to Theo and life on a farm in the middle of nowhere." Eleanor nodded miserably. Mrs. Reynolds set down her teacup. "Let me tell you something about Theo Silvera. That young man has faced more loss than most people twice his age. His father died when he was just a teenager. He and his mother kept that farm going through sheer determination. Then Rebecca left him, and 6 months later his mother passed. Most men would have broken under that much pain." "He's the strongest person I know," Eleanor agreed. "Not just strong," Mrs. Reynolds corrected. "Resilient and loyal to the bone. If Theo Silvera has asked you to marry him, it's because he believes in you, in what you could build together." Elena twisted the ring on her finger. "I believe in him too. In us. But this job, it's the kind of opportunity I never thought I'd have." Mrs. Reynolds studied her thoughtfully. "Can I ask you something, Elena? What were you running from when you showed up at Brancalus farm?" The question caught Elena off guard. "I wasn't running from anything. I was caught in a storm." Before the storm, Mrs. Reynolds pressed. What made you move from place to place, never settling down? Eleanor considered the question. I guess fear. Fear of getting attached, of losing people. My parents moved us constantly. Then they died, and my grandmother took me in. When she passed away, I was alone. It seemed easier to keep moving than to risk putting down roots that could be torn up again. And now? Now I'm afraid of making the wrong choice, Elena admitted. Of giving up a dream I've had for years for something I never planned on. Mrs. Reynolds smiled gently. The best things in life are rarely planned, my dear. They come to us unexpectedly, like visitors in a storm. As Elena drove back to Brancaleuse, Mrs. Reynolds's words echoed in her mind. The snow had stopped falling, and the countryside was transformed into a glistening white landscape, peaceful and pristine. The beauty of it made her heart ache. She found Theo in the barn, checking on the animals. He looked up when she entered, his expression guarded. How was town? He asked. Cold, Elena replied, then took a deep breath. Theo, I need to ask you something important. He straightened, his eyes never leaving her face. Anything. If I stayed, Elena began carefully, if I chose you and Brancaleuse, would it really be mine too? Would I have a say in how things are run, in decisions about the farm? Theo's brow furrowed. Of course, why would you think otherwise? Because this is your family's legacy, Eleanor explained. 4 generations of Silveras, you said. I'm an outsider. Understanding dawned in Theo's eyes. Elena, if you marry me, you'd be a Silvera too. The farm would be as much yours as mine. And if I wanted to make changes, Elena pressed, if I had ideas about expanding, trying new things? A smile tugged at Theo's lips. Like what? Elena had been thinking about this on the drive back. The East Wing, Rebecca's studio. It's just sitting empty. What if we converted it into guest rooms, opened Brancaleuse as a small bed and breakfast? Theo looked surprised. A bed and breakfast? Elena nodded, warming to the idea. Just 3 or 4 rooms to start. We'd offer farm stays, a chance for city people to experience rural life. They could help collect eggs, pick apples in season, learn to make preserves. I could use my hospitality experience, and it would bring in additional income for the farm. Theo was quiet for a moment, considering. You've really thought about this. On the drive back from town, Elena admitted. It just came to me. But if you don't like the idea... I love it, Theo interrupted. It's brilliant, actually. Diversifying our income, sharing Brancaleuse with others. He took a step toward her. Is this what you want, Elena? To stay? To build something here with me? Elena looked into his eyes, the eyes that had studied her so seriously that stormy night months ago, that had gradually warmed as they'd come to know each other, that now held such hope and love. I called Marjorie Davis from the truck before I came to find you, she said. I turned down the job in San Francisco. Joy bloomed on Theo's face. You're staying? Eleanor nodded, tears filling her eyes. I'm staying. This is where I belong. With you at Brancaleuse. Theo closed the distance between them, gathering her into his arms. Are you sure? I don't want you to regret this, to resent me someday for keeping you from your dreams. Elena shook her head, her hands coming up to frame his face. Don't you see? My dreams have changed. Before, all I wanted was security, stability, a job I could count on, a place that wouldn't disappear overnight. She glanced around the barn, at the animals they cared for together, then back to Theo's beloved face. But now I want more than just security. I want a home, I want purpose, I want love. I want to build something lasting, something that matters. And you can have all of that here, Theo said softly. With me. Yes, Elena whispered. That's why I'm choosing this path. The one that began the night someone opened a door and said, I'd never be cold again. Theo kissed her then, a kiss full of promise and commitment and joy. When they broke apart, he rested his forehead against hers. When do you want to get married? Elena smiled. Spring, she said decisively. When the apple trees bloom, we can have the ceremony in the orchard. Perfect, Theo agreed. And we can start work on the bed and breakfast right away. The East Wing just needs updating, not major renovations. As they walked hand in hand back to the farmhouse, snow crunching beneath their boots, Elena felt a sense of rightness settle over her. The job in San Francisco had been a dream born of necessity, of a girl who believed security could only come from a steady paycheck and a permanent address. But here, with Theo, she had found something deeper, a belonging that went beyond mere security, a purpose that was more fulfilling than any career. Spring came to Branca Luz farm in a riot of color and fragrance. The apple trees burst into bloom, covering the orchard in delicate white and pink blossoms. The vegetable garden expanded under Elena's care, sprouted neat rows of green. The animals had new offspring, chicks chirping in the coop, baby goats, frolicking in the pasture. And in the east wing of the farmhouse, the transformation was complete. What had once been Rebecca's studio was now 3 charming guest rooms, each with its own bathroom, decorated with handmade quilts and simple country furniture. The Branca Luz farm bed and breakfast was ready for its first guests, booked solid for the coming months, thanks to Mrs. Reynolds's enthusiastic promotion in town. On this perfect spring morning, Eleanor stood in what had once been the guest room where she'd first stayed, now converted into a dressing room. Clara and Mrs. Reynolds fussed around her, adjusting the simple white dress she had chosen for her wedding day. "You look beautiful, dear," Mrs. Reynolds said, carefully placing a crown of apple blossoms on Elena's dark hair. "Theo won't know." "What hit him?" Clara agreed, stepping back to admire the effect. Elena smiled at her reflection in the mirror. The woman looking back at her bore little resemblance to the cold, wet stranger who had knocked on Theo's door that stormy night. This woman had confidence, purpose, belonging, written in every line of her face. A knock at the door announced Jim, who would be walking her down the aisle in the absence of her father. "It's time," he said with a warm smile. "Everyone's waiting in the orchard." Elena took a deep breath and nodded. "I'm ready." The path to the orchard had been cleared and lined with white stones. As Elena walked arm in arm with Jim, she could see the gathering of people ahead. Not just the townspeople of Pinewood Valley, but the first guests of the bed and breakfast as well, all turned to watch her approach. And there, beneath the largest apple tree, stood Theo. He wore a new suit, his dark hair neatly combed, his face solemn until he caught sight of her. Then his expression transformed into one of such joy, such love, that Elena felt tears spring to her eyes. When she reached him, Theo took both her hands in his. "You're so beautiful," he whispered. The ceremony was simple and heartfelt. They exchanged vows they had written themselves, promises to support each other, to build their dream together, to keep each other warm through all of life's storms. When the minister pronounced them husband and wife, Theo gathered Elena into his arms and kissed her as apple blossoms drifted down around them like snow. The celebration afterward was everything Elena could have wished for. Tables had been set up in the farmyard, laden with food prepared by Clara and the other women of Pinewood Valley. The town's small band played music for dancing, and children chased each other between the tables. As evening fell, lanterns were lit, casting a warm glow over the festivities. Eleanor and Theo moved among their guests, accepting congratulations and well wishes. "Mrs. Silvera," Mrs. Reynolds said with a pleased smile when she embraced Elena, "how does it feel?" Elena glanced at Theo, who was showing some of the children how to feed the baby goats. "It feels right," she said simply, "like coming home." Later, as the party continued around them, Theo led Elena away from the crowd, back to the spot in the orchard where they had exchanged their vows. "Happy?" he asked, his arms encircling her waist. Elena nodded, leaning into his embrace. "More than I ever thought possible." Theo brushed a fallen apple blossom from her hair. "You know, when you showed up that night soaking wet and shivering, I almost didn't open the door." "Why did you?" Elena asked curiously. Theo considered the question. "Something in your eyes," he said finally. "A strength, even in your vulnerability. I recognized it somehow." Elena rested her head against his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart. "I'm glad you did. Open the door, I mean." "Me too," Theo murmured, pressing a kiss to the top of her head. "It was the best decision I ever made." As the stars came out above Branca Luz farm, Elena Silvera stood in the circle of her husband's arms and knew with absolute certainty that she had made the right choice. The path that had begun on a stormy night with a simple act of kindness had led her here to this moment, to this man, to this life that was only just beginning. She had arrived cold, wet, and alone. But Theo had kept his promise. She would never be cold again.